This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Mr. Max Ma to the podcast, and he is the founder and CEO of 7THONLINE. Welcome to the podcast, Max.
Thank you, Jason.
It's really good to speak with you. We tried to make this happen yesterday, and we had some technical issues with internet connectivity, and we had to delay our conversation until today. So I appreciate you persevering to be able to make this conversation happen.
Yeah, so it's ironic we work in the technology space. We couldn't figure out how to get a podcast going yesterday.
We're still so dependent on the internet, and I tell you, here in Mexico, where I live in Puebla City, I've got Starlink here. Most of the time, it's very good. It's got a really fast download speed, but in many cases, especially with video conferencing, you need not only a good download speed, but you need a really good upload speed as well. And Starlink is much more limited on the upload speed, but I think even you had some internet connectivity issues yesterday.
All right, it's all behind us. So
Exactly, and you're based in the great state and city of New York, yeah?
absolutely, yeah, this is a great place. We are like 200 meters away from the center of Times Square. People said Times Square is the center of the world. So we're essentially 200 meters away from the center of the world. And this is also the reason why we call our company 7THONLINE. We are also 1 block away from 7th Avenue, which is called Fashion Avenue of New York City. So we are in the center of everything.
Wow. And I think you said yesterday, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have been in the same office space for 21 years, I think you said, or something like that?
Yeah, 21 years.
Wow, you must love New York, and you're very close to Gary Vee, aren't you?
Yeah, New York is an exciting place.
Yeah, I'm going to be there next week for Shoptoberfest that Shopware is putting on, so I'm very much looking forward to that. It's my first ever trip to New York. I'm bringing my wife along with me. She's never been to New York before either, so we're gonna extend after the conference. We're gonna extend it out for a couple of extra days so we can do a little bit of sightseeing and pretend like we're tourists for a change.
I can give you a couple of hints to go to some hidden crown jewel of New York City. Quite interesting places in New York you can visit, and it's usually not on the tour guides. So I can definitely share with you some of those exciting areas in the great city of New York.
Listen, I'll take all the advice I can get, no question about that. But look, we'll take that off air. But what we really want to talk about today is what you guys do in the area of AI-powered demand planning and inventory management software for retail, wholesale, and omni-commerce brands and businesses. But before we get into the detail of that, why don't you tell us how you even came to be in this space, the tech space, the commerce space? You've been doing this for 25 plus years. I've been in the industry also for 25 years. So we have seen a lot of changes come to our industry over the last 25 years. AI for sure is the most disruptive, but I'm old enough now. I'm 50, and I remember both the pre-internet age, the coming of the internet age, the mainstreaming of the internet, and then what I call the mainlining of the internet, like a drug directly into our arm with this little device right here. It's like we're correct. Our brain is directly connected to the internet now. And we've seen so many changes. We've seen the coming of mobile was probably pre-AI. It was probably the single most disruptive change that happened to our industry over the last 25 years. There's been lots of incremental disruption, but certainly mobile changed everything. And now AI is changing everything else. So how did you even come to be in this wonderful space of commerce to begin with?
Yeah, it was all by accident. My first job out of graduate school was a software engineer for a fashion company, building CAD tools, computer-aided design tools for our fashion designers. And then I was exposed to the retail chaos. People buy hundreds of millions dollars goods without much reasons behind. And the business in all shapes, I have to say, suffer with margins. Why? Because they bought unsold inventory, and at the same time, they had consumer couldn't find what they want. So it's a jeopardy on both ends of the problem. My boss back then, the owner of my first job, enticed me to start another company, which is to try to bring the fashion business online. That's why it's called the 7THONLINE. That was the beginning, and then we saw uh, all kind of problems that we can solve beyond bringing people online, right? So we start building this great tool we have been offering to our customers around the world. It's really from the very beginning of merchandise financial planning to pre-season assortment planning and product allocation and the in-season open to buy and the item planning, or the whole 9 yards. So we spent the past 25 years continuously building out all these great capabilities. With AI capability, we actually started about 20 years ago. It actually exists a long time ago. Our chief scientist, he's a great legend from the data science world. He's the first he created the first computer code to solve traveling salesman problem. And in the 90s, he actually edged up PwC's artificial intelligence practice. So that's how far back AI actually exists. Today's AI is actually building on top of the past 20, 30 years of worldwide collaboration, right? Not only the software side of the AI has improved dramatically, the hardware as well. NVIDIA, all this, and semiconductor to speed up the AI processing. So it's really great. And we find this pushing all companies to pay attention to how to improve their efficiencies, particularly in our space in the retail inventory planning, is waking people up.
It sure is. And there's so many directions we could take this conversation, but let's take it from the most fundamental place where businesses that are doing manufacturing, or they're doing distribution, or they're doing retailing, it all starts with typically a PLM process, a product lifecycle management process. That's typically where it starts. So we've got a design of a product. Maybe it's a shoe, maybe it's a t-shirt, maybe it's a pump. It doesn't really matter what it is. It starts out with a PLM lifecycle where there's usually a tech pack associated with that product to begin with. It's got a design file, whether it's a stylistic design file or a specs-based design file that's sent off to either a factory or a contract manufacturer or whatever. And that's generally where products begin life. They begin life as part of a product lifecycle management process that starts with some form of a design, a tech pack, the external packaging, the internal packaging, the product itself, dimensions, specifications, all this sort of stuff gets wrapped up in these design files. And then that forms the backbone of the product. Then usually we go through a sampling process, make sure the product is exactly what we want. Sometimes there's a CAD design associated with that tech pack as well, especially if it's a highly complex product to be built. We get some samples. We then have to, once we're happy with the samples and we're happy with the product and we want to go into production with it, we then have to predict, even for that initial order, that very first order, not even indent ordering or reordering, we have to decide how much of this bloody thing are we going to produce, and especially if it's got sizes and colors and variations available with it, then we have to think about how much on that variation curve we want to produce in that initial order. Then we have to decide over time, after we've received those items, we start selling them in the market across all these different channels that we sell across today. Then we also have to track momentum of that product. we have to track supplier performance of that product, and then we have to decide how much, if at all, we're going to reorder, and how frequently we're going to reorder those products from the supplier or the manufacturer. So this is a very complex and disjointed process in many respects. So at what point do you come into that chain of the entire supply chain planning process? Where do you start becoming involved in that process?
Yes, you are really putting everything in a great science of description. So we actually come before PLM starts.
Wow, exciting.
So give you an analogy, PLM designs the product, right? Who are you designing for? Each brand has their consumer segmentations. So we start before product design to analyze whatever just been sold. Who bought your product? Who bought your product at what price point and where? And we use the data to determine the future assortments in such a way at very high level. Okay, how many sweaters? How many t-shirts? And then designers take that number. Let's say if we recommend 10 sweatshirts, they probably can design 15, 20 so that they give the buyers the more choices. But if they design 50 or 100, that's too much, right? So we provide the guidance for the product design team to start with. And we go parallel with the product design team to really understand each localized demand, right? Because when the product design team is actually finishing up and building samples and looking for sourcing partners and the factory, and we need to analyze each POS terminals, which could be a brick and mortar store or e-commerce website or Amazon platform, to understand the future local demand. And this way, we will be able to provide the production team the actual demand guidance. Without doing all this, let me give you the dark side of this industry. There has been a few surveys done worldwide. My last customer in Asia, they had 8,000 stores. They analyzed their year-over-year inventory. Everybody came up with the conclusion: in the fashion industry, 60% of their products they call bar, means the products don't produce any profit for the company. Only 40% actually produce profit.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, that's the fact. You can go to any fashion houses, any retail places. That's why you see all the markdowns, right? All the leftovers, and at the same time, lost sales, right? Consumer desperately looking for what they are going to shop, but oftentimes they couldn't find their sizes. They couldn't find the style they are looking for. They saw their friends wearing a gray jacket. They went to the same store. So no, sorry. So all these problems is because retailers traditionally use this great tool called Excel. I'm probably broken many people's heart by saying this. Excel is not a solution. It's actually a bigger part of the problem. Why? Because it can have the corporate overview, oversight, and control, and one version of truth. Everybody create their own formulas, right? Got their own version of Excel. And it's so hard to aggregate all the data from each Excel sheet. I saw a customer recently try to send us an Excel file of their purchasing plan, inventory purchasing plan. 78 meg.
Whoa.
Yeah. Fortunately, they see next door in our comfort zone was a thumb drive. Just copied it. You can't send it over anything. So with that kind of gigantic Excel, what can you do? You're going to mess everything up. So as a result of using Excel, 60% of the inventory never produce a penny of profit. So that's what the industry needs to face. So this AI drives is definitely will be able to solve this problem. We're not imagine this will solve everything. We'll probably move from 60 down to 50, maybe 40% box. Box means this is an industry
Yeah,
jargon means
it doesn't make money.
It doesn't make money. So it's incremental improvement. That's what every day we're meeting with, try to work with each customer, Europe, Asia, everywhere, try to help people to do better job with their inventory management.
Wow, amazing. And do you guys primarily focus on just the fashion industry? Because this is obviously an industry like the back of your hand. You have a lot of experience in it. You feel the acute pain of the industry. It's a very obvious pain point, even if, because of that 60% that are dogs, not even with heavy discounting, not all of that ends up getting sold. And so we have a massive disposal problem in the industry too, where a significant amount of fashion products end up in landfill and thrown away and everything else because these brands don't want to devalue their brand or they get recycled into something else. So we've got a problem here where particularly fast fashion has a pretty bad rap in the industry and it has a lot of people have a very bad view of it because there's so much waste in the fashion industry. So I can understand, not only does it hurt the profitability of these manufacturers and brands, but it's not really sustainable either. So it's like a triple whammy all the way around. The customer doesn't get what they want. The brand maybe doesn't survive because they're not making money on 60% of their product. Plus, we're throwing a whole lot of stuff away. So this is a massive problem within the fashion industry. But there are many other verticals, many other categories, B2B, B2C, D2C. There's many places where demand planning is a massive issue for all of its own unique reasons. Each category has got its own unique set of issues with it. But fashion certainly comes to mind immediately as I've seen it in the industry many times before. First of all, do you specialize in fashion? Second of all, do you primarily work with brand owners / manufacturers? Or are you also working with just standard retailers that are curating a range that's coming from other suppliers and deciding, okay, you have these 50 hoodies that you could choose from. We're going to help you curate what you actually bring in. Even if you're not the brand owner, even if you're not the manufacturer, you're curating and you're buying off of suppliers, you're spending money on product that you need to make sure you can sell. So do we also help aggregator retailers do better at their curation process?
Yes, very good question. Retail has been our focus in the US and Europe. The reason why has probably something to do with their personal background. We have enough challenges. Retail is the most challenging sector of all the supply chain segmentations. But at the same time, we do have customers here in Europe selling small appliances, furniture, packaged food, all kind of things. But in US and Europe, we have been exclusively primarily servicing retailers, especially fashion retailers. Not only the brands, as you many stores, they just buy inventory from brands to sell in their stores. Essentially what we do is to match consumer segmentation or the micro level demand signals from all segments of consumer to match that with the products brands and the retailers offer, right? So This is the science part. There's no other way. Many people just pull things out of their heads. I believe people will buy this. You can't do that. You have to use, we are in AI age, you have to use data, right? To really analyze your target audience, your target consumer segments, and then understand your product characteristics, right? We call classification or attributes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you use the math to connect them, right? To correlate what product would be in favor of certain segments of customer, right? At what price? So this is what we've been doing. And in the whole supply chain world, this has to be the most difficult part of the class. Fashion has seasonality. And another difficulty of fashion is it has the most SKU counts than any other supply chain segments. But in addition, we also have customers, they produce electronic auto parts. Demand is demand, doesn't matter where the demand comes from, right? We also have equipment manufacturers, right? We help them to analyze their historical customer purchase. So, various channels, they have their own stores, and also they have their third-party distribution. For instance, wholesale, franchisees. What 7THONLINE has done a great job. We are probably one of the very few tools can really combine all these signals from all these channels, right? So most of our competitors, they focus only on brick and mortar retail business. Why? Because it's much simpler, because each store has the POS machine, creates, records POS transactions.
In the point of sale.
Exactly, point of sale. But for wholesale, you don't have that.
Yeah.
For franchise, you don't have that. So how are you going to really manage the demand of such, complex problems? That's what we have figured out. We can leverage different source of data, right? For brick and mortar, your POS data, sell-through data, typically recall. For wholesale, you have sell-in data, right? You have buyer's input. And now we use AI. We can actually crawl certain areas of social media to gauge the macro trends of certain fabrication or color or product segments. So there's a lot of data available. And Samsung has done a great job of managing this variety of data sources so that we can produce the demand signal for our customers.
Yeah, there's so many facets to this. I've been a part of some demand planning implementations before, and there's always, in theory, if you had perfect data, you could do perfect demand planning, but rarely is there perfect data for a start off. Oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges is the lack of structured product data that can be fed into a demand planning system. That is a major issue, because if you do not know the commonality of attributes and you can't see through the commonality of attributes, for example, a specific color or a size or a specific style or a specific design or a specific whatever it is, a specific hem length or a specific neck type or a specific, there's 1,001 different attributes that apply to every different type of clothing. You know this well because you come from the industry. And so sometimes the challenge is it's very difficult to do demand planning if we don't have really good structured product data so that we can connect the dots between products that have similar attributes and say, look, okay, cool, across your entire, and we also have, but before I get into this, we also have a problem of normalizing attributes where, for example, the color red, there might be 50 shades of red across all of our product types. And we can't just, and the thing is, we have to aggregate some of this structured data into logical parent groupings where you say, okay, I've got a rose red, I've got a candy apple red, I've got all these 50 shades of red. I've got to aggregate them together underneath a parent attribute of red so that I can say, look, across our 50,000 SKUs, 80% of the products we sell have the parent attribute red. That's a pretty good signal that our customers like bloody red products, and we better, when we do designs, like at least 80% of our products that we design should probably have a red base color of some kind. But I said all that to say that, as with anything, it's like garbage in, garbage out. You can have the best analytical tools. You could have the best AI tools. You can have the best machine learning tools. You can have the best predictive analysis tools. But without really good structured product data, it makes what you do almost impossible, right?
Oh, you touch a very critical point. This is actually with every single new customer we engage with, we have to go through this step. Basically, putting discipline in place to have data integrity. So right now, my team is next door. They've been working with a client, a very large client, to sort it out because many retailers, they didn't realize what you just said. They don't have master data, right? And their data warehouse project failed. So centralized data source doesn't exist. So all these problems were dealt with. So 7THONLINE, as a matter of fact, we often become the most trusted data source for inventory purposes because when we start with a client, we do data validation. We do all sorts of data mapping so that data quality is going to be like what you said, garbage out. So that we not only don't take the garbage data, we actually, most of the time, every night, we cleanse the data. For instance, in the POS data, there oftentimes zero sales and resulted from zero inventory, right? So what we do is we do an AI algorithm to backfill the POS data. Assuming your inventory is not zero, how many more you can sell, right? So we rebuild POS history. And we also take out we call unproductive sales, right? Customer define their own parameter, what they consider as unproductive. Is 40% discount or 50% discount considered we have parameter building, and then we, in the POS data, we remove the numbers result from unproductive sales. So you have a perfect history so that you don't repeat the mistakes you made before. Right. Otherwise, I saw with my own eyes, you have lost sales feeding into the system. Next season forecast came out with no sales. Your excess inventory is going to recommend you to buy more inventory. Right. So if you don't cleanse the history, don't reconstruct a perfect scenario history, you're going to repeat your mistake from history. So the data problem we find is the single most critical starting point for any type of the data-driven projects.
Yeah, and I guess it's the same with shrinkage and stock takes and stock adjustments where, okay, cool, we thought we had 100 units of this thing, but obviously we had 5 of them stolen out the back door, so we now have 95, so those weren't sales, so those weren't revenues, so we have to decrement inventory by 5, but that's a shrinkage value as opposed to a sale value. So normalizing not only the inbound, outbound, and sell-through data, but also normalizing things like damaged product, returned product, shrinkage, being able to normalize all those values over time to make sure that in look backs, we are as accurate, at least as we can, possibly be over time, because what we may have to do is we may have to do, for example, if they only do a stock take once a month in a retail store, then obviously the data can only be really, truly normalized as accurately as possible every 30 days in a look back window. So there's a lot going on here in most of these businesses. And I'm guessing you also have to take into account, particularly if it's just an aggregator retailer that's buying off of other suppliers, you have to take into account supplier performance too. For example, if on average I buy from this supplier and from the day I order it, on average, it's going to take them 83 days to get goods into my hands, then that's going to impact not only the date in which you order and how far in advance you order, but it's also going to impact the quantity that you order, because you know that's going to be a problem because that's going to take so long. Now, if on average they only take 30 days to replenish or 30 days to supply, that's totally different. It's a totally different kettle of fish. And so I feel like there's so many inputs. Then there's weather. Then there's so many things beyond seasonality. There's drop-based businesses that are all based on new releases and demand and FOMO. And there's just so many inputs, I feel like, in your world that I'm guessing and then you not only got regional variations, you got channel variations, right? And then the demand within those channels over time. And I'm guessing that at times it feels a little overwhelming, the sheer number of inputs that you have to consider.
So we never try to eat the elephant with one bite, right? Our approach is we take a phased approach. Right? Sometimes we engage a customer, we say, let's look at sometimes the easiest area to solve, to gain confidence with their management. See, we spend some money and effort to put in this solution, and in a few months, up running and generate business benefits. And then slowly move on to another area. No, for customers, stay with us for a long time. Calvin Klein has been working with us since 2007.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and many PVH, their parent company, first only put 2 brands on, and then 5 years later, they said, let's add 5 more. And then a couple of years later, they add their entire brand family into this under our system. So that's just one. The more example, there's some clients that have multiple regions. Okay, let's deal with the biggest market first, right? And gradually cover the entire spectrum. Because many clients, they're just nervous with change management, right? So if we take such an ambitious approach, let's solve all the problem, and you're going to get really tangled up with a lot of unexpected headwinds. So our team, I don't take any credit. They've been working in this type of business for their entire career, and they understand a lot of internal dynamics. They really guide our clients to most best step. Wherever client, they said, hey, can we sign a contract and use the system in 2 weeks?
Wow.
And it's a very famous intimate apparel brand. When we first heard it, we just crazy. And 2 weeks later, they started using the system. That's a dramatic case, right? Is that we don't want any fancy steps. We just want to leverage the core features by doing some manual upload, right? And then we figure out how to handle other more complex problems. When Calvin Klein, PVH, bought their sportswear casual business, they came to me and said, can we go live in 3 weeks? Fortunately, their casual wear was also a kind of us, but it was very aggressive. This is a story I always tell many people. So I asked the head supply chain, I said, why you're in such a rush? And he said, 3 weeks later, I need to cut my production POs. I said, okay, educate me. If you missed it, what will happen? He said to me is that in the past several years, we've been using your system. We are able to cut our production orders 1 week earlier than all other fashion houses. I said, I'm not a supply chain expert. Tell me more about that 1 week. That because that 1 week, fabrication, slippers and buttons are all cheaper material. Raw material, all the material are cheaper. Production, pricing are cheaper because the factory owners hasn't seen the majority orders coming. Whoever come in first, they're willing to offer a little bit discount. So they said because of that 1 week saving, they save $1 each clothes.
Wow. Wow.
They save one. Their product and it's cheaper by $1. And it's in order for my partners, basically a lot of resellers, their products, we split half of that dollar with our partners so that we all win, so that they are more motivated to collaborate with us to get this weak advantage. So that's a real story.
Wow. And I guess, like you said, the boil the ocean approach never really works for these large programs of work. They have to be it has to be literally a program. It's not a project, it's a program of work, and it's usually got to be factored in and budgeted for over a long period of time. Although you can get some quick wins, like you just referred to, you can get some quick wins very quickly. I'm guessing that the single biggest challenge, but also opportunity, is system integration for you guys. We have to be plugged into every single transactional system you've got in your business. If ultimately you've got an ERP that ultimately aggregates all transactions across all channels, regions, markets, everything, great. We can just plug into one system, your ERP. If not, if you've effectively got QuickBooks running the back office and you've got a point of sale system running your stores, and then you have Shopify for your e-commerce platform, and then you have Shopify feeding listings into Amazon, in which case we're going to now have to integrate with a POS system. We're going to have to integrate with Shopify. We're probably going to have to integrate directly into your Amazon account, your Seller Central account. There's going to be like 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 sources of data in some businesses that are very diffuse in the way, if they don't have a data warehouse, if they don't have an ERP, if they don't have an OMS system that you can pull transactional data or throughput data through, they don't have a WMS you can connect to. I guess it just really does depend on what their back office stack looks like. And then it also depends on whether that back office stack is legacy and it's all based on CSV import and export to an SFTP server versus a REST-based architecture where you can integrate via APIs. I guess you see all types of levels of maturity of business that you have to try to get integrated with. And there's 100 different ways to get integrated with those businesses. But what size and scale of business typically starts to see benefits from what you do? Because I'm guessing that they have to be doing roughly a certain amount of revenue per year, or a certain number of orders per year, or have a certain number of channels they're running, or there must be certain metrics that you look for in an ICP, an ideal customer profile, that you say, I can guarantee we can come in and we can make you more efficient because I've seen 100 like you before.
In the past means pre-COVID, 7THONLINE is an enterprise software system for the inventory management space. So most of our customers bigger in size. How big? Maybe 100 million above. As you said, you have to have the infrastructure, the data, everything. We have seen practices come from the companies who have over the time built this thing called a master data.
Yep.
Instead of integrating with all sorts of ERP, OMS, WMS, they have done a great job putting all this data into a centralized data warehouse. And actually creates data, right? You don't have 3 different prices for the same product. right? So that's pre-COVID. During the COVID, because a lot of stores shut down and we got a little bit breathing room, we built something called a 7THONLINE. It's a light version, 7THONLINE. Basically, we took all the fancy features which are more suitable for each organizations, and we built a scaled down version. Very small businesses. How small? We have a client, $1.5 million selling our Shopify. And that's the kind of customers 7THONLINE has been servicing, right? Not only here and also around the world. So talking about the size, our 7THONLINE product has been very well received, right? Because you basically level the playing field. You give the $1 million retailer the same AI capability a $1 billion enterprise can afford, right? It's what technology is supposed to be.
Yeah, democratize it to the point where it helps the $1 million a year guy or girl get to be the $100 million a year guy or girl, because they're not wasting money on inventory that they can't move, and they're not disappointing customers because they don't have the inventory that will move. And so I feel like this is something that demand planning is something that is often, especially for smaller businesses and smaller enterprises, it is one of the last things they actually think about. They think about, okay, I need an ERP, I need a PIM system, I need an e-com platform, I need maybe a CDP, I need marketing automation, they think about product innovation, and they think about marketing, right? And
Yeah,
they think about operational prowess in terms of getting products out the door and into their customers' hands as quickly as possible. But
yeah,
unfortunately, the financial underpinnings of any of these businesses really come down to, are you bringing in products that will sell? And do you have enough of those products that have demand to make sure that you can actually meet the demand that's in the market? And
yeah,
sometimes that doesn't come into a business's mind until they have, say, a financial controller or a CFO or somebody that's actually looking at the numbers every single day. Oftentimes, they're not thinking about that stuff because they're a creative, they're a designer, they're an entrepreneur, they're whatever they are, but they're anything other than a CFO. And so sometimes these businesses, the last thing on their mind is demand planning and financial rigor. And so I feel like if they can implement something like Online or Seventh Light, I feel like this is going to plug a pretty big hole in these businesses that oftentimes stays there until they get to 20, 30, 40, $50 million worth of revenue.
that's and it really makes people's life better. It's about quality of life. When you have a tool where a small customer who sell about $1.8 million jewelry, custom jewelry, they have about 3,000 SKUs, 5 of them running the business. And they say, Max, because one day they come to my office and then when they're leaving, I say, by the way, are you like to use Samsonite? Before you use Samsonite, we don't know where is our inventory, how much we have left, what's lacking, what will be sold out. We have everything in one order, and you can sort, you can filter, and you can look at it. It's so easy to manage now. And easy, that's what people want to do. And the Samsonite automatically integrates. We do all the wires through API with all the e-commerce platforms, Amazon, Shopify, so on and so forth. And they just turn on the switch. They send the request to us, they want to use it. And the next morning, their data will be available to them. And it's easy for them. They don't have to try to figure out where to copy the data, right? On all these platforms. So we take care of that whole tunnel thing for them. They just do whatever capable of doing, which is managing their business.
Yeah, no question about it. And what is on your radar over the next 6, 12, 18 months? Is there anything you don't do yet today that your customers are asking you for? Or is there anything, as you look out into the market of demand planning, inventory management, supply chain management software, is there anything out there that you see and recognize as gaps still either in your platform or in the industry as a whole that you say, we don't do that today, but in 6, 12, 18 months, we'll definitely be doing that thing? What is high on your priority list today?
Yes, we are developing more AI capabilities in the area of capturing the expert's thought process and propagate that to all level of planners, buyers. Right? So that's one area we're really diving and try to build that. Another area is using AI to create dynamic classifications. Today's classification are all human defined, right? It's very subjective.
And it's inconsistent across whole industries.
Like what you said earlier, there's 20 given reds. With AI, this is our science team has been in the middle of doing their models to have systematic attributing, right? And the purpose of attributing is to improve the accuracy of your forecast by having more relevant data, right? Attributes to aggregate all sorts of products together, right? With the attribute similarity. So that's the area we're also focusing on, where the non-retail customers knocking on our door. This is fascinating. I've been traveling around the world, and I didn't believe actually when I first heard about it. Around the world, most of the supply chain industries for demand planning, they still use Excel, right? I just couldn't believe that. I spent quite a few months talking to all kind of experts, large ERP companies, because they got the visibility of their clients, right? There's tens of thousands of customers. I asked them, what do your clients do with demand planning? Excel, no question about it. And they actually warned me, as Max, don't be too happy with that, because people are Excel.
They love Excel. It's unbelievable. I've seen it even in the B2B world, which is where I focus primarily on manufacturers and distributors, and the number of challenges that they face in supply chain. It's not just in their own businesses, but it's also, for example, a manufacturer. They really need visibility on sell-through data and supply chain data and inventory holding data of their master distributors, their distributors, and their dealers, for example. They need that visibility amongst the whole supply chain. Otherwise, they're flying blind with so much data missing from the pipeline that it's really difficult for them to know. Just because I sold it to my master distributor doesn't mean it made it into the dealer or installer's hands or whatever it might be. And so therefore, we've got supply in the market that is non-transparent to us until they order a replenishment order from us. Then we know what the demand was. And that's starting to change. There used to be very much a closed kimono mindset in the B2B world, where distributors don't want to share data with manufacturers, don't want to share data with distributors, master distributors don't want to share data with sub-distributors, and distributors definitely don't want to share data with dealers. And so it's one of those things where retail has historically been a lot more open-minded, even at conferences. Retailers will come to conferences, they'll talk about what's working, what's not working. They look at it as earned media. They're like, it's a chance for us to talk about our brand on stage, we'll take it. B2B's very different story. They play their cards much closer to their chest. They're much more secretive about what they carry. Their e-commerce experiences are usually gated. You can't see anything unless you authenticate. You can't see the products. You can't see your pricing. You can't see inventory. You can't see anything unless you authenticate. And you have to have a dealer account, usually with a supplier, to even be able to get access to a trade price list. And so historically, the B2B world has been just very cloak and dagger in its mindset. But that's slowly starting to change because everybody along the B2B supply chain says and is starting to slowly realize the more transparent we are up and down the supply chain, because a lot of these B2B businesses, they're surviving on 3% net margins or less. So the reality, the only way they can claw back any margin back out of that is to have much more efficient supply chains. And the only way to do that is to share data. So it's in everybody's best interest to share the damn data. So I'm quietly hopeful and I'm quietly confident that as the data gets more broadly shared up and down the B2B supply chain, platforms like yours will be able to help these B2B businesses do better and be better with more of the data holes being plugged than what there are today.
That's a really good point, because 7THONLINE's first application is a B2B application helping the salespeople from the brands to collaborate with the buyers from Macy's.
Wow.
So we are the first mover advantage. Today, we are still the only one doing that business. The B2B, we call the prime collaboration. And that problem we tried to solve back then 25 years ago still exists in many industries, not just in retail. So I talked to one very large automotive parts. Basically, they produce electronic components like the dashboard control, the car seat control components. So I talked to the number two guy in the company. They're huge. They are like billions of dollars of revenue every year. So what's your biggest problem? So buyer constantly change their orders until the last minute. So I talked to an expert who had been working with the buyer, which is multiple buyers of car manufacturers. So this guy is an expert. I said, I heard this component manufacturer has this challenge of, dealing with constant change orders. And he told me because all the car companies don't know how to forecast their demand.
That does not surprise me at all. Does not surprise me at all.
I didn't believe it. Let me tell you, a week later, I met one of the largest cell phone producer. So I didn't go to them. I met with a senior manager of the company. I didn't go to him to try to ask a business from there. I said, you know what? I want to work with your suppliers so that I can help you with. You must have all sorts of tools. And he said, we don't. We only have Excel. And then later on, he was asking me if I connect all the Excel using some collaboration tools like a Google Doc, right?
Yeah.
Will that help us? Can you put all the algorithms in those Excel sheets, even if you can connect Excels together? It blew my mind away that they're one of the largest, right? I don't want to put the name out there. They don't even have demand planning process using the most advanced tools like AI and analytics. Everything is Excel. That is really mind-boggling. That's the B2B. We are talking about the suppliers to device companies.
OEM manufacturers and suppliers to OEMs.
They're all, I didn't realize until a couple months ago. I didn't believe in the first place. They're smart people. They build huge enterprise. They cannot use just Excel. That's what they've been doing.
Wow.
Unfortunately, there's tens of trillions. That's the size of the
Opportunity.
problem. Trillions is not billions. I never imagined in my lifetime I get into this kind of, you can call it opportunity or problems, until a couple months ago. And we have one of very few, if not the only one, to service this B2B problem, to solve this B2B problem, sorry. Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yes.
Listen, an hour has absolutely flown by. This has been a fabulous discussion. I've learned an absolute ton from you. I appreciate you spending time with me. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, I like to flip the script. I like to hand the microphone over to my guest so that they can ask me one question, any question they like. It could be personal or professional. Mr. Max Ma from 7th Online, what is your question for me today?
Yes, with current geopolitical dynamics, you talk to a lot of experts. So, what do you see this globalization is heading to, or is heading to buy, or heading to generate itself?
Look, I think it's a really interesting question. And some of the manufacturers and distributors that I'm speaking to in my consulting daily life, what most of them are doing right now, and this may not be true in a month or 2 months or 3 months, but for now, instead of just changing their prices across the board, most of them are actually putting in a separate line item on an order, almost like a handling charge, but it's a tariff charge, and it's a per order tariff charge. And so they usually have some very complex calculations behind the scenes based on country of origin, based on value, based on contribution components, based on a whole bunch of different factors. They've usually, oftentimes, they're working with freight forwarders to help them identify what their effective tariff rate is going to be on a given shipment so that they can make sure and make that adjustment on the fly. But instead of wholesale making changes to all their price lists, because in the B2B world, price is an attribute of the customer. It's not an attribute of the product. And so when you go to change prices in the B2B world, you can sometimes be changing a million price lines, literally, depending on the size of your catalog and how many customers and how many unique price lists you have. And so what they're usually doing is they're doing some sort of back-end calculation based on the SKUs of an order, based on the average tariff rate, and then putting in effectively a surcharge at order line level, not per line item, but at the order line level of an aggregated, averaged tariff rate for that order. And that way, if the tariff rate changes over the next, say, 6 months, 12 months, whatever, it's easy to adjust the calculation that derives that final line item rather than changing all their prices every single day or every single week or every single month. That's just too much. That's too hard for most B2Bs. And so they're taking it in aggregate and they're adding almost like a handling fee, but it's a tariff charge because most systems, ERPs, commerce platforms, et cetera, they already have the concept of a handling charge. And so we've got a simple place as solution architects, we've got a simple place to map that value into so that it can get into checkouts, it can get into invoices, it can get into ERPs. We've got a relatively simple mechanism to be able to manage this, but it's definitely messy is the word I would use right now. I think there's going to absolutely be some level of deglobalization. I don't think globalization has benefited everyone equally around the world, and there's probably better ways to globalize, to be honest. There's been certain elements of exploitation, there's been certain elements of some countries winning more than others out of this. And so I think revisiting all the pros and cons of globalization and what that looks like across the board, I think there's going to be some resets happening. There's no question about that. And I think it also comes down to America wanting to retain reserve currency status. There's more driving that aspect of things than I think most people give it credit for. That is something America is able to export its inflation globally, and they don't want to lose that advantage. And so I think anything they can do to forestall de-dollarization, they will do. They'll go thermonuclear on that aspect if they have to, because that is too big of an advantage to lose, and they will do almost anything to stop that from happening. And yet, with the level of deficit spending in the U.S. right now, that is
Wow.
encouraging de-dollarization. So there's a lot of tension, global tensions right now. Market's still at all-time highs in the U.S. right now, so you can't never count America out. That's what I would say.
Interesting. Really, this is the first time I heard somebody give me this aspect. It's very interesting. Thank you very much. That's why you talk to all kind of people. You come to this understanding of this current situation. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. It was super, super fun talking to you. Now, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile into the show notes, and a link to your website. But other than that, how do you like people to get a hold of you and chat all things demand planning, supply chain, inventory management?
Yeah, so we have a website and people can actually come to us. And also my email is my first initial and the last name at MMA and ShamsOnline.com.
Wow. Mixed martial arts. That'll be the easy way people can remember that. MMA, mixed martial arts at 7th Online. I love it.
Yeah.
Listen, this
Yeah, when you come to New York, let me know. I love to take you and your wife around. I love this city. I've been here 35 years.
wow.
So, yeah, this is my hometown and exciting place.
I love it. I hope I get to catch up with you next week after Shoptoberfest. But in any case, I wish you every success with 7th Online. I've seriously enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate your time with me today, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.